Geeks. No one talks Trek like we do.
Hello and welcome back to We Are Starfleet. I'm your host Craig McKenzie. Give us a follow on Starfleet Pod on Blue Sky and Instagram, and check out our website www.wearestarfleet.com for more about the show, your hosts, and links to many podcast episodes. Joining me to discuss episode 6 of season 4 of Strange New Worlds Off Hour, it's Ian Buckley. Hello, welcome on.
Hey Craig, how are ya?
I'm doing good. Well, some things inflame my allergies a bit. Maybe it's a wormhole. We'll discuss it.
It certainly isn't all the pollen flying around.
Not in Scotland, no.
Oh, well, yeah, true. Here the air just gets thick with the stuff certain times of year.
I'm just allergic to other human beings. That's all it is.
Sure, I definitely have those moments.
Before we get started, I would like to refer you to our presenting sponsor, Fansets. They are the proud sponsor of Trek Geeks, which is the network that We Are Starfleet is currently a part of. We joined the network from our calendar not that long ago, from your calendar a long time ago. That's weird. We're in a wormhole. It's time dilation. It's all happening. But if you go to fansets.com, you'll get to see a collection of really cool looking pins from Star Trek and other franchises that you can order and put them on your bathrobe, on your jacket, on your lapel, on your bag. You can put them on a pin board. You can put them wherever you want, but you can certainly buy them. They look great. They look very authentic. You can pretend it's a comm badge and make the silly noise when you tap it. You can do all that good stuff. If you want to save some money, if you put the discount code TrekGeeks in there, you'll save 10% on your entire order. And if you spend more than $30, you'll get free shipping in the US by default. And looking at the stuff on here, it would be very easy to spend $30. The trick will be not emptying your bank account. Ian, have you emptied your bank account with Fansets pins yet?
No, but I did get a couple of insignia pins, so hopefully the next time I go to a convention, I'll have some to show off.
I think they do ship to the UK, just not for free, and it'll probably get held up in customs.
Yeah, they ship international, but you don't get that free shipping.
Yeah, it would end up costing me a fortune. So maybe I'll just get some people to buy me some and I'll collect them when I'm next in America.
Perfect.
If I ever make the trip or don't get dragged to a windowless room and never seen again.
Black bagged.
But that's fansets.com. Discount code TrekGeeks gets you 10% off. Spend $30. You get the shipping for free, but you'll still spend a lot of money. But at least you can feel like, yeah, I got some money off and it didn't cost me anything for them to put it in a box. Top stuff. And We Are Starfleet is part of the Trek Geeks podcast network, as I mentioned. So on with the show. We're going to talk about Strange New Worlds, episode 6, Off Hour. Before we start, don't know when you were last on. I was last on episode 2, so we'll just go over what we've been thinking of the season so far.
I was here last week.
Last week / in the future. Wormhole.
Yeah.
What are you thinking of the season so far, in case this is someone's first episode?
I think overall I'm pretty positive. I think that for me, what is yet to happen is for there to be a standout, excellent episode so far. An episode that's made me go, wow, that was a good episode of Star Trek. I know I said that about a couple of episodes in season 1, a couple of episodes in season 2. Don't remember feeling that way about any one particular episode in season 3. I know you and I both had our ups and downs with that season, even though I think I'm a little more positive overall. And so far this season, I've seen a few episodes that I have liked, but I haven't really found one that I've loved. So overall, I'd say it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I'm more positive at this point in the season than I think I was last season.
I'm straight down the middle. I have liked 3 of them and not liked 3 of them. So where the season will go, who can say? We're half and half where I'm concerned at the moment. In terms of an episode that I thought was great, I thought the second one was. I think that was a very good horror experience. They did a really good job with that.
You know what? That's a good call. That's probably my favorite of the season so far. I think it's the best execution of concept. They clearly lay out each episode this season what the concept of that episode is that they have. And that was clearly an episode that they wanted to do a ghost ship episode, and I thought they did a pretty effective job. I think they executed on that concept quite well, so I'm glad you pointed that out.
It's up there with Star Trek's best horrors, I think. Up there with, say, Empok Nor and whatever else.
Yeah, I think it would make a good Halloween episode of Star Trek for sure.
Yeah. And episode 6, the one we're talking about, Off Hour, what did you think of that one?
I liked this episode overall. I think that, like these episodes sometimes end up being, there are certain characters, certain scenarios within the episode that are more compelling than some of the others. And so when we cut away from those scenes, I have a feeling of, no, let's spend more time on this storyline and less on this one. I felt a little bit like that this week. We'll get into some of the specific storylines in more detail, but overall positive. I thought there was good character work, good acting. I thought that it played well in the disaster episode sandbox that Star Trek has sort of established at this point. There's been a few episodes playing in these waters before. I think it's of a kind with those. I think it does well in that tradition. I think that also having a show that's made in modern day, you can do certain things in terms of plotting and also in terms of visualization when it comes to these disaster episodes that you couldn't do back in the 90s or early 2000s, like the grav plating going wrong. You can do more intense visual representation of what that might be like, or of being stuck in this neutrino wormhole tube thing. The show is much better able to visualize some of these threats than we were able to in series past.
I liked this one as well, although I think it's falling back on some frustrating habits that the show has overall. I think the execution of the disaster aspect of it was very good, and some of the character stuff was very good. Some of it not so much, which we'll get to. There's one half of it that I found really effective and the other half that I found quite frustrating, and we'll get into the frustrating habits. I've said frustrating a lot, but we'll get into the habits this show keeps falling into and not realising that it's doing it, I suppose. But it was generally a very tense, very propulsive experience. I like how they kept escalating the threat, and each problem that was created came with a solution that didn't quite work, and they had to rethink after it. It just built on itself, for the most part anyway, until we got to the end, which I'm less enamoured with, but we'll definitely get to why I didn't like the way that it ended. It's definitely, we've written ourselves into a corner. How do we resolve this? Magic, pretty much. We'll get to that. But generally, I enjoyed it. It's one of the better episodes of the season. Is it up there with the Star Trek disaster episodes? Probably not. I would say the episode called Disaster is better than this, the TNG one.
I think that one sets the model, and that is the episode that any episode dealing with this kind of situation, even tangentially, I think is always in the shadow of that episode, but I think it does well for itself. I think it's pretty good.
The episode Disaster, you have Picard stuck with children, his worst nightmare. You have Worf delivering a baby, probably one of his worst nightmares. You have Data having to take his head off when his body gets electrocuted, all this stuff. In this, there's some things that are handled better than others.
I agree.
All right, let's get into it. So we've already talked about what episodes it's reminiscent of. There's all sorts. There's Disaster, or even Memento Mori in the first season, which was more combat based, but still it had elements of we're lacking power and everything's broken and we have to get out of here.
Yeah, and the escalating problems of an episode like Civil Defense in DS9, where you solve one problem or you think you've got a solution and then an automated response pops up saying, not so fast.
Oh, Civil Defense is unbeatable. There's just something incredible about that episode. If only they could make those again. Well, that's what they're trying to do, but if only they could make things that are that unique again. That would be nice.
I agree.
We'll start with characters because I think everything's framed around the characters. So we have two main characters in this episode, Scotty and Chapel. They're going through some stuff. In my review, I called this the potential birth of the miracle worker, Scotty.
Yes, I think very intentionally so.
Yeah. In the sense of he's already very skilled and knowledgeable, but he's still hung up on the loss of his ship and crew when he was introduced. That's understandable, but he's worried about making a fatal mistake that'll kill another ship and crew, and here he is here having to solve the problem and understand that the stated limits of the technology aren't the actual limits of the technology. I think that was a really good resolution for him to come to, this whole idea of she'll hold together, don't worry about it. He didn't say it as confidently as his future self will. You've got the ship shaking around and people falling over, and Scotty's like, don't worry, we'll be fine. And you believe it because he's saying it. Whereas here he's like, I think we'll be fine. He says it confidently, but he's not confident about it. I think that was a nice little setup for that reckless chief engineer we're going to get one day.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing the birth of the pressing his hand to the hull to kind of commune with the ship mode of Scotty as engineer. And I'm here for it. I think this actor has done a good job with this character. I think this episode gives the character some good moments of growth. I'm glad that we got Pelia Pelia back in human form for the first time since episode 1. I was beginning to think that she didn't exist anymore. Obviously, they're transitioning the focus of the show to Scotty, and I think that makes sense logically for where we are in the show, in the series, and in this character's development. So, yeah, I thought this was an element of the show that worked pretty well.
Yeah, and Pelia not showing up until later on, whereas Scotty would usually refer to her expertise, but he was having to figure it out by himself until he could speak to her.
Yeah, and having her shunted off separately, I'm sure, was a way for them to conveniently schedule her shooting around her availability, because they could just shoot her separately. She doesn't have to interact with the rest of the crew except over audio. And ditto with last week, she could do all of her lines in ADR. She didn't have to be on set. So they're finding ways to get her still on the show while obviously working around a very limited availability.
I think the one drawback to the Scotty of it all was he always knew the answer. He always knew how something would work. He had a gap in his confidence, which was great, but I would have liked to see him come up against some gaps in his knowledge as well. For someone to ask him, how do we deal with this? And he's like, I don't know. Rather than, oh, we just do this. And then someone has to work out how to get the obstacle to doing that out of the way. If it had been this, I'm going to have to read the technical journals after this, because he loves reading these technical journals later in life.
I think his challenge was not to overcome a lack of knowledge. It was to overcome that lack of confidence. The thing that Pelia gave him that he didn't have was the confidence to apply all of the knowledge that he actually has. She's giving him a little bit of encouragement to develop a feel for the work and not just the knowledge. I liked her little joke about, I never even studied particle physics. Don't tell anyone. She's imparting a kind of wisdom on him that he lacks, where he has plenty of knowledge. It's the ability to apply it effectively and calmly and confidently that he's perhaps lacking, and that's what he's beginning to develop more of.
Just a little bit of a not knowing the answer to everything would have helped me, I think.
I hear you, especially for where he is in his career. I get the impression, based on things in the past, that he has a lot of intuitive knowledge. We've seen moments with him and Pelia in the past where she's like, you do actually know this stuff. You just need to stop getting in your own way. I like the idea of his limitations being something other than skill or knowledge-based limitations, but I do hear you in that you want to avoid having a character seem like they always have the answer. I guess you got a little bit of that in this episode in his interactions with the Vulcan cadet, where she made the suggestion about shutting off life support. She came up with that idea and he didn't. So you do get a little bit of that in this episode of someone else. He doesn't come up with every solution to every problem. He does have a little bit of help along the way.
Yeah. One thing I was actually thinking when they mentioned in one of the earlier episodes that he has so many brothers, I'm just wondering if they're going to pull a Smallville on us and reveal that this isn't the real Scotty. One of his brothers is the real Scotty, the older one, to canon align it, because they did that with Jimmy Olsen in Smallville, where they killed him, and then, spoilers for Smallville, it turns out he was Henry James Olsen, and his little brother was called James Olsen.
Great.
And I'm just wondering, God, they're not going to pull that, are they? We're not going to spend, 3 seasons getting to know this character, and then he dies and his brother takes over.
No, they are not. They are not going to do that.
Because he is supposed to be older than Kirk, remember, in canon.
He is. I think that's just one of those things. They're just going to wave their hands and say, don't worry about it. They said a bunch of things in TOS that obviously don't still hold true.
Yeah, but it's supposed to shore up the fact that Kirk's the youngest captain in Starfleet, and all these older officers that are under his command respect him.
Yeah, I get why it doesn't make sense in terms of casting. I just think that they are beyond the point of caring and won't bother retconning any of that stuff. They'll just say, don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the breaks or adherence to canon when we talk about Chapel. I have issues there. I've got thoughts on that. But yeah, I like the whole, every ship glitches, you have to trust your instincts, ignore what the manual says. And it reminds me of the episode Relics from TNG, where Geordi says, the engines aren't rated to handle this much or whatever. He's like, forget it, I wrote it. Don't worry about it. You're always more conservative on paper.
Right. And they do run into that theme with Geordi and Leah Brahms, with the real Leah Brahms, when she comes on board and he's like, the conditions of operating these engines at length in space are different than laboratory conditions and measurements that you take. And so whatever you wrote in the manuals, when you're an engineer in the field, you have to develop a feel for how the machine you're operating actually works.
Yeah, and there's all these things where it says rated for this weight or whatever, and you know that it can probably take more. Maybe not forever, but certainly over a period of time before it starts to fail. So yeah, it's not that the Enterprise will instantly blow up as soon as they cross the warp threshold. It's just based on the math that they did whenever they put these things together. It's not guaranteed that it would survive.
Right.
But it will survive long enough. So like I say, later on in his career, you'll have the ship shaking itself apart and Scotty, don't worry about it, we'll be fine.
She'll hold together.
Yeah, and it's great to see the start of that because that's a hallmark of Scotty. So seeing that in action and he learns that while dealing with a disaster situation is very dramatic, but I think it works.
I agree.
On to Chapel. We learn in this episode that she hasn't got a permanent posting on the Enterprise and she has 1 foot out the door, which is the standard Strange New Worlds of this. Is the first we're hearing about this problem that's existed for such a long time. And Benga wants to leave for reasons that are so far his own. It's because he's not Chief Medical Officer in the original series, but he is in the original series. I think he appears in 2 episodes.
At least 1, yeah.
I can't remember what he does in those episodes, but he is there.
He is. I don't remember if he's a Commodore at that point or some sort of senior medical officer on some station. I can't really recall what his role is.
No, I would need to watch them again, but he's still around at that point.
Yeah.
And Chapel is also still on the Enterprise.
Yeah, Chapel's still on the Enterprise. It was one of those things that made me go, because they have Mbenga's life in peril, and they're far enough into the series that I guess they could have just said goodbye to the character at this point, but the knowledge in the back of my head of this is a character that we meet in TOS, so he must survive. But they'd made enough changes to the canon and given us enough wiggle room to allow for changes in the canon that I was honestly questioning whether or not they would kill him in this episode. To me, it added to the danger, the fact that they've been playing as loose with the canon as they have. It allowed me to worry that, oh man, they might actually change this.
That's part of my issue because I don't think they are going to really change anything significant. And I think this plot is actually a bit of a microcosm of the unwillingness to do that. We've had this repeatedly in this show. So in this case, Chapel says, I would need to leave with you because I don't think I'd thrive under a different chief medical officer. And then it gets into this whole, you've always had 1 foot out the door, you haven't even got a permanent posting here, blah, blah, blah. It's just this manufactured conflict. And to an extent, it makes sense because we've had it previously established that Chapel isn't about commitment. In the first season, she had a guy that she would see when she was on leave or whatever, but there wasn't any commitment there. And then she was, I guess, in a committed relationship with Spock for a bit, which somewhat flies in the face of that. But I understand that she's not someone that likes to stick around in one place for too long. And she talks about keeping her options open. And Mbenga's like, what are you talking about? You should stay here. That's a recurring issue in this show. We've had Uhura go through a, I don't know if I should be here arc, only to be like, yep, the communication station, that's where I'm going to be sitting for the rest of my life. I'm happy with that. And then you had Ortega's saying, I fly the ship. I wish there was more to life than flying the ship. Then, no, I fly the ship. So there's very much a stay in your lane theme that keeps cropping up with characters in this show. They think about, should I do something else? Nah. They just keep resisting that notion. And that's fair enough to an extent because people choose career paths for their own reasons and they like doing things and they don't like doing things. But it feels like every time they bring it up, the resolution's the same. And it's almost like back in the good old days, so to speak, wherever it's like, is Worf going to leave and rejoin the Klingon Empire? No, he's not. He'll be back next week. It'll be fine. It just feels like the characters are resisting progression. And we know that Chapel's potential is, well, she sang about it, didn't she? She sang about her infinite potential in Subspace Rhapsody. I want to be careful I'm not devaluing the nurse occupation, but this is essentially her getting to, I'll be the nurse instead of a researcher or a scientist or a doctor myself. This version of Chapel you could see succeeding in Mbenga as chief medical officer. She's that good. She has so many strings to her bow.
It is the tension that they inevitably introduce in setting this show when they do, of having these characters who we know cannot either die or leave, having these existential questions. And I'm not saying that you can't do some good exploration of this stuff, but you really have to nail it. You really have to motivate it thoroughly and well. And you have to choose how often you do it, because it's a tricky thing to constantly ask us to worry over the fates of characters whose fates we already know.
Yeah. I wonder if the producers or writers of this show are devaluing the nursing occupation themselves by saying she can't just be a nurse because they've added so many things.
I hear what you're saying. I don't think they're doing that. I think it's just as simple as TOS, Chapel is a nurse on the Enterprise. So that is and must be her path. And we can say goodbye to Jess Bush for a few weeks to go do a field research project while the actress goes to film another project somewhere. We can handle big changes for the character like that, but we know that the character eventually finds their place in the Enterprise. So let's give her a dramatic episode where it finally clicks for her that the Enterprise is where she's meant to be. And this sense of wanderlust and impermanence that she's been feeling will finally come to an end when she's confronted with this really traumatic experience that crystallizes for her what's most important for her. And I buy it. For the most part, I think the issues with it are on the writing side. I think that Chaplin and Mbenga, Babs and Jess Bush, I think that they both perform these roles really well. I think that the sequence, isolated in of itself, does have a lot of tension to it. I think that this injury situation is one of the gnarliest things we've ever been presented in Trek. It reminds me of this horrible true story that happened in New York. I don't remember when, but some poor person got struck by a subway train and was pinned between the train and the platform. And you've been to Manhattan, there isn't really any room between the train and the platform. So this person was essentially being held together by the pressure between the train and the platform and was alive, quote unquote, so long as the train remained in place. But as soon as there was no saving this person. It was this kind of situation where the minute she removes the table, Mbenga would die. And the minute they moved the train, this person would die. And it was obviously all over the news here because it was so horrible, but it reminded me of this situation. And I found it really effective in and of itself. But I hear what you're saying about the larger issues that this sequence illustrates with these characters, where we're being introduced to problems that we've never heard about before, where it feels like almost in a schematic way characters are being forced into conflict that doesn't quite feel organic or natural just so that they can process something in this week's episode.
Yeah, and a big part of the problem for me is you don't really get the through line to her making that decision. I like the personification of what the problem seemed to be, as in, when I'm here, your loyalty keeps you here and you'll end up not benefiting from that. So it's, I'm pinned to this table, you refuse to leave me, and we'll both die. That's the personification of that problem, but taken to an extreme, of course. So in theory, a satisfying resolution to that would be Chapel letting go and leaving, and understanding that she can't save him. Of course, that means you don't have Mbenga anymore.
But guess who we're being introduced to this season at some point?
It's next season for McCoy.
Oh, is it next season for McCoy? What are we getting? Sulu this season? We're getting someone else this season from the TOS crew. I thought it was Bones. Maybe it's Sulu.
I think both are supposed to just be in the final episode next season, but they may be introduced earlier, like they did with Kirk. Yeah, we've cast him for season 2, and then he shows up as a quote-unquote surprise at the end of season 1.
And again, I know this is sort of a macro level problem because the show, the characters in it don't know that they're in a show and that there's only a limited number of episodes left. But you're having this whole conflict with Mbenga about, maybe I'll leave, maybe I'll stay. We know you're leaving. We know that you're leaving soon because we know who ultimately ends up being the doctor on the Enterprise. So again, you run into this problem of, even if we're relieved that the character lived and is staying, we know that it's only going to be for a few more episodes, a handful more episodes, and then eventually, he's going to leave.
Don't worry, I'm sure he can commit many more war crimes before he goes.
I hope he does. I love when he does.
It's just a little war crime. Don't worry about it.
I know, there's just something about the archetype of the warrior healer that I love and I respond to, where he's just full of pathos, just talking about, it's a cruel irony that my gift for killing is equaled only by my gift for healing. I love that shit.
And the thing with Chapel, as we've been saying, that she is destined to be McCoy's nurse. That's where she has to end up. And I've talked so many times about how Strange New Worlds sometimes behaves like a reboot new timeline and sometimes doesn't. And it seems to be caught between those two pillars, doesn't it? It seems to be, how far can we take these characters? Oh no, we've taken them too far. We have to walk it back.
And they try to hand wave it away with, well, there's been so many changes in the timeline, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. But you're right. It does feel to the audience much more like they're just picking and choosing what they want to keep and what they want to change.
Yeah. And it's things like, we need to keep the characters in their quote unquote iconic positions. Uhura has to answer the communications. That's what she does. That's what she's known for. And there she will stay. Same with Chapel. She has to stay in sickbay. Doesn't matter how many research fellowships we give her or how many radical things that she gets up to or genetic splicing or all these other things that she's able to do. And I'd be okay with that to an extent if they took the argument to its logical conclusion, which they really don't, because you have this whole thing where Mbenga is effectively implying that she's being held back through her loyalty to him, but that's just not the case. She still went away for that research fellowship.
Yeah.
And as far as she knew, she wasn't coming back after that. In fact, why she did come back is never really stated. It's just she does. But she didn't agonize over that decision at all. She just left. She was like, this is what I'm going to do now.
Yeah, it does seem like the character's emotional investment in being a part of the ship and her crew and their intensity of bond to one another does feel like it's malleable depending on who's writing the episode and where they want the characters to be for the stories they want to tell that week.
And you've got Mbenga telling her, no, stay here. Don't pursue your dreams. You're better off here where you're liked and respected.
Yeah, it's an understandable perspective to have. It's just a little bit surprising from him based on what we know of him and their relationship and the things that she's done in the past. And I don't remember him being discouraging of the last time she left the ship. I thought the escalation of their fight before the accident felt a little inorganic, inauthentic. It felt more, like I mentioned earlier, more like it was just written to get them to a place of heightened conflict before she was forced into a caretaking role. When he says to her, as soon as things get real, you run. What is it that's suddenly gotten real for her that he thinks she's running from? Nothing's been established. And then her response to that is, I could say things about you, but I don't. What's that? What do you mean? And what does that have to do with what you're talking about? It just felt like escalation for escalation's sake, and I really was hoping for something more grounded in the reality of these characters and their relationship with one another. I didn't buy it.
Yeah, and as soon as something gets real, you run. She's been here for over 3 years, assuming that a season is a year like it used to be.
Right. There's been a lot of real shit that's gone on.
Yeah. The only time she may have ran is when went on that research fellowship, but that's pursuing her career ambitions.
Yeah, and arguably maybe running from the Spock emotions of it all, but he didn't call her out then.
No, he was encouraging her, like you said. And this version of Chapel is a much richer character than she was in the original series, and part of that is because it was a woman in the 60s. It doesn't matter if you're married to the showrunner.
Right.
She's still a woman in the 60s, and she's the assistant, so to speak. But in this, she's ambitious, she's a genius, she's curious, she'll explore almost anything. I'm going to keep coming back to it, but it just doesn't make sense that she would want to stay in the role that she's currently in.
Yeah, I think it would if they spent a little bit more time with this character justifying why she does. Give me a reason. There's a lot of extremely intelligent, capable people who go into nursing and stay there, and they love it. They have reasons. If this is her decision, fine. Start articulating the reasons, even once. Ultimately, we know, again, just because of the knowledge that we have of the series, she's going to be on the Enterprise for several more years. And I'd love a little bit of exploration of why. I think it goes sort of unspoken here in this episode. She has a lot of personal connection to Mbenga and to wanting to save him, but also this is a really extreme problem for her to solve. She gets to save a life that the computers, that other doctors are telling her is impossible to save, and she is finding a way to save it. That is something she can only do here on the Starship Enterprise. That is essentially the pitch that the show is making to the character of Nurse Chapel. See the crazy shit that only you can do here on the Enterprise? Isn't that exciting? Isn't that enough of a reason to stay? But all of that is internal. None of that is dramatized through her performance or through action. It's all subtextual through the experience, and that's fine, but it's a little thin. I think you and I are both looking for a little bit more meat on the bone, a little bit more real digging in of her mindset.
Yeah, and if this character wasn't Christine Chapel and she was, I don't know, Charlotte Church, that's a singer. But anyway, if she was not bound by canon, it could be, I'm after your job, actually.
True.
That would allow her to progress. And
to your point, if they weren't bound by canon, Mbenga would be having a conversation with her about her taking over for him when he leaves. But instead, because they know Nurse Chapel stays a nurse through TOS, that possibility is never even mentioned, even though logically, if canon didn't exist, they would be having that conversation. You have to imagine.
it isn't till the motion picture where McCoy says Chapel's an MD now.
Right.
Which they do nothing with. She's just there in the background in motion picture. I don't think she's in any of the other movies.
Yeah. We can talk about how the movies on TOS treat Chapel and Rand till we're blue in the face. It's not great.
Yeah.
With some of this stuff with canon, because it feels like they have been picking and choosing as they've gone, I'm okay with them maybe going a radical different direction. Maybe it doesn't have to be killing a character who's alive in the TOS era. Maybe it could be promoting one of them, making her a doctor first. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's the tension that they're going to keep running into, which surprised me when they did it with Ortegas. They did the Stay in Your Lane Ortegas story because she isn't shackled by canon. She can do whatever.
True.
But Chapel is stuck in that way.
Yeah, I think it's also an argument for, not that I necessarily need to see Ashley, I swear I have nothing against Ortegas, but the characters that don't have a footprint in TOS, you need to put them in peril. Because they're the ones that we have no foreknowledge of, well, we know she's getting out of this somehow because she's in TOS. No, have these new characters be the ones that are put in mortal peril because we don't know their fates.
I did laugh in this episode when La'an says, I'm more expendable than Spock. Well, yeah, you literally are.
You actually are, yeah.
Which is funny. But even with this, Mbenga talks about Chapel being on loan from a research institute or something. That's her field. That's where she came from.
Right.
So it's almost like she's on the Enterprise as a researcher because she gets to do her stuff there, and they just call her Nurse Chapel for some reason because that's what canon says. But it's so weird that they've made her, I'm always straying into the territory of insulting the nursing profession, and I'm definitely not. My mum was a nurse, and it's a very noble profession. I say that sincerely. I'm not saying it to distract from my point, but it's the fact that if Chapel showed up in this show and was a nurse, and she was fully committed to nursing, and she was very happy with that, then cool. But that's not the character they introduced. They introduced a character that wants to do everything, and she gets to do a bit of everything.
Yeah, true.
Which is a problem for me. And then when it's at the end of the episode and she says to Pike, I want a permanent posting. Can you make that happen? I don't believe that she's at that position now. I don't believe that she has fully committed. There's a missing few beats in between.
I hear that. I largely agree. Even though I think there's enough there to kind of connect the dots, it's too thin. They needed to flesh that out a bit more.
Yeah. We get Dr. Boyce in this episode.
Yes. His face looked familiar. Do you know what I know him from or what we know him from? I couldn't place him.
The actor's called Brian Markinson, but I didn't look up what else he's been in. But he very much looks like that guy sort of casting, doesn't he?
Yes.
It just looks like you've seen him a million times, but he's so sort of innocuous that you don't register him.
Oh, I recognize him from Mad Men.
That won't be what I recognize him from.
He is the husband of a woman who Don Draper is having an affair with at some point. Good actor. One of those character actor guys who pops up in a bunch of stuff, and he pops up here, and he was treated as a little bit of a reveal, like, who is this new doctor character? So I do wonder if he's going to be sticking around for a little while, maybe introducing a point of conflict at some point because of his different style.
The original Boyce looked a lot older than this guy.
Yes.
Although maybe he's 45 or something and it was just the 60s.
Yeah. Honestly, man, you're not kidding. People looked a lot older than they were sometimes back then. All the smoking and the drinking and the lack of sunscreen does a number on you. But reintroducing that character in that way from the TOS pilot was fun. I think that based on the fact that they made point of his presence, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of him as the season goes on. Maybe for the rest of the series, I don't know. But he may be a continued presence.
You'll probably see enough of him to wonder why he's there because he never does anything. I feel like that's the kind of thing they're going to get with him.
They do have such a bad habit of doing that in this show. Even this little background characters, they'll take a scene or two to single out some character. Like, remember the last season episode where there was this multi-armed bartender character that they said, hey, you're cool. Why don't you come on board the ship? Did we ever see that character again? There's a bartender in this episode. If you're going to do that, if you're going to take time out from the episode and spend it on some background character, essentially, to bring them into the fold, that's fine. But don't just drop them. Put them in the show. Have them in the background. Have them have a line or two every couple of episodes. That's fine. But don't keep introducing these characters and then doing literally nothing with them.
I thought was going to happen, and then I remembered what show I was watching, but what I thought was going to happen was that Chapel ignoring his order was going to have some kind of consequence later in the episode. It's like, well done for saving Mbenga, but you still ignored a direct order, and that has consequences. But like I said, then I remembered I was watching Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, and I could see the argument being if Mbenga was incapacitated completely, but I don't know if that had been established yet. He was saying that Mbenga is going to die, but he was still lucid, as was established in the show, which Bryce didn't know. He had no way of knowing.
He got the scan from Chapel. She sent him the scan.
He got the scan, but remember, she did a verbal assessment where she determined that his cognitive functions were still fine. That, to me, is the piece that, if you're going to be technical about it, probably saves her. As far as she could tell, she still had a chief of medicine she could speak to. And this other guy just asserting that he was in charge wasn't cutting the mustard for her.
Some level of conflict might have been nice, though. Because it is very much, why is Boyce here? What does he actually do? He bandages Una's leg, and that's about it.
It's to introduce this character for future episodes and to introduce that he does things a little bit differently.
Yeah, but they'll have 5 minutes of tension, and then it'll be fine.
Maybe. We'll see.
He'll realise that the way Chapel works isn't conventional, but he likes it anyway.
Give him a few episodes to figure that out.
Yeah, pretty much. In terms of the other disaster zones, I guess, so you have the bridge. Pike electrocutes himself to turn a console off, and then he's knocked out for a couple of scenes, and then he's back. That annoyed me when he showed up with nothing more than a bandaged hand. Can't we just have him out for the count for most of the episode?
It was an odd beat. Oh, okay, so Pike's just out of commission for the rest of the episode. That's fine. I believe he was activating the shields to keep the ship from being torn apart, and that knocked him out because all the consoles had been electrified. It felt like a worthy sacrifice, presuming he's not dead there on the ground. Him just popping back up halfway through the episode as if nothing had happened was a little odd for me. It felt a little bit more to do with having him have an emotional beat at the end with that decision of jettisoning that pod with Spock potentially still in it, where he could say, Spock, before he does it. No one else would have had the connection there, but he didn't need to be revived. I thought the whole, I'm patched up, but I'm fine now, it just felt a little abrupt and almost kind of silly.
Yeah. And it would have forced Ortegas to step up as well as being the ranking officer. She's in command. So her jettisoning the pod, that's a decision.
Yeah, having these moments for characters who don't get the chance to sit in the big chair and make big decisions. I feel like we know who Pike is. I feel like we know who he is when he sits in that chair. You've got a unique circumstance where, just like the TNG episode we referenced, Disaster, you have characters on the bridge who are in lack of communication with other parts of the ship. The ranking officer is unconscious. As far as you know, you're in charge and you're making decisions that affect everyone else on the ship. That's dramatic. Let one of these lower ranking characters step into that position.
Unfortunately, it's Troy that's the ranking officer now. That's the problem that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, at least in that episode, that provided some real conflict of, yes, I understand that you technically pull rank, but come on, you're the ship's counselor. Come on.
And she had Rowan O'Brien on her shoulder telling her what to do.
Yeah, that's a very real conflict and unique to that role. Again, they found really creative ways of what's the biggest conflict we could introduce to this scene, and having Pike just pop back up after being knocked unconscious by a blast of electricity to the chest without being treated at all, that struck me as not really quite maximizing the tension of that sequence.
I'm fine, not even a hair out of place.
Yeah, not a single mussed hair on my beautifully manicured head.
Although I imagine it would take quite a lot to get through his bulletproof hair products.
Yeah, that shit is staying in place.
But he had his bandaged hand and his shirt was charred a little bit, so I guess that's enough.
I guess.
I thought they were going to actually ape, and not that they should necessarily do this, but the Starship Down Deep Space Nine episode, where Sisko's concussed and Kira has to keep him awake. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. That's a great example of you have a captain who was injured doing something noble to save the crew, and you don't have access to medical care because of the state that the ship is in, and now you have to manage the tension of, oh man, our captain's possibly dying and someone has to make the decisions on the bridge. It felt like there were more opportunities for tension and conflict and escalation of stakes.
And I suppose even in that scenario, Una's a phone call away, so she can tell her what to do.
Right.
And the mess hall thing as well, I thought the gravity is increasing and it's going to crush us eventually was a good problem, but I didn't like the instant solution. I would have liked that to play out over a few scenes. As the situation escalated, the gravity gets heavier. And eventually they have to do that. Okay, we're going to have to cross the room and get crushed, potentially.
Yeah, or if the grav system is malfunctioning, have fluctuations in the gravity where some sections you get really heavy, some sections you're really light, and it throws you off. They could have been a little bit more creative with that. I liked that it was the kind of problem we hadn't gotten to see in these other disaster episodes because of the limitations of technology, etc. I like that we were able to visualize some of it. The sequence where Una is trying to get the thing and she's dealing with a bone-crushing gravity. That sequence was effective, but to your point, there should have been a bit more of that. Have the tension build, have the problem build, and be visualized and executed in ways that are a little bit more inventive.
Again, to compare it to Disaster, you had Geordie and Crusher trapped in the cargo bay, and they had the plasma fire, and it's like, that's not great. We'll move all the volatile stuff to the other side of the bay. That's bought us a little time. Okay, now we're going to have to flush the airlock. Unfortunately, we're going to have to risk getting blown out into space to solve this problem.
Right. Hold on tight.
That was proper escalation of that.
Yes.
Instead, you watch Una apparently be stronger than a piano when she crawls across the floor. Although that compound fracture was hard to watch. When the bone poked out of her leg, that was ugh.
Yeah, absolutely gnarly.
She got bandaged up and she was fine. She wasn't even in pain after that, it seems.
That's true. Hey, maybe they had more of the magic particles that they zapped her with.
Well, they might have done later, but certainly at that point, it was, okay, you've had a bandage, that's good. They could have made more of the fact that she's out of commission. She has to sit down and tell people what to do, and you've got the commander has to order people to their potential deaths, rather than Spock saying, I'll do it, I'll crawl out on the hull, no worries.
Yeah, I think, again, an opportunity to escalate the stakes and the tension. You could have had Una be successful, but the gravity caused so much pain that she passed out from the pain or something and wasn't available to make any more decisions or to relay things. Again, just another little degree of complication that wouldn't necessarily have taken much more screen time.
Yeah, for sure. So the mess hall stuff actually ended up being pretty toothless because once they solved the gravity problem, there wasn't another problem.
Yeah, that sequence was the point of that whole section, that resolution. And again, that scene is effective. But you're right. Mostly it's just waiting around and table setting for when that scene becomes necessary. And then the aftermath, she's just communicating and facilitating communication. And that's it. And waiting around for the situation to be solved by other people.
Yeah, and Spock doing a mind meld while wearing a glove bothered me because they're not supposed to be able to do that.
You know what? I had the same problem, and then I remembered the motion picture, and I was like, never mind. He's in a fucking suit, and he mind melds with the entity. So I'm like, okay, if he can mind meld through a spacesuit, then he can mind meld through a glove. I had more of a question about someone else initiating it who isn't a Vulcan. That struck me as being new, a new twist on that.
Well, I was just thinking of Wrath of Khan, where he takes his glove off to touch McCoy's face.
Yes, I had a moment of, don't they need skin contact? And then I remembered motion picture and I'm like, you know what? They don't care. It doesn't matter. It's whatever the story needs.
It still bothered me slightly. One thing that didn't bother me was Scotty thinking that the computer didn't recognise his accent because I feel that pain.
I did like that bit.
The amount of times I've had my smart speaker not do the thing I asked it to do.
I was going to ask if that's something real. I love that it is. So
yeah,
funny.
Sometimes I'll ask it to turn lights on and it'll just start playing something. I don't even know what you started to play. Like, what did you hear?
What did you think I said?
And it's usually when I haven't turned the volume down, so I have to yell at it to stop.
Yeah.
It's very much when you're not an American and dealing with voice recognition. It's a recurring issue for anybody that's not American. Onto the resolution then, we have magic particles that can solve everything. It can create fuel and it can heal this lethal injury that Mbenga sustained. The thing is, they had written themselves into a corner where it'd be very difficult to come up with a practical problem-solving solution to what they were dealing with, but I don't think that's an excuse as such. The problem I had was that Chapel and Scotty didn't earn that resolution. It was just, oh yeah, these magic particles are probably there. Oh, look, they are. Let's point them at what we need to point them at and problem solved. We're in the perfect conditions for these super rare, possibly don't exist particles to exist, and now we've solved everything. It just felt like a bit of a cop-out to me. But it was, yeah, you'd escalated it to such a point where, because of the way they'd written the script, it was the only way out of what they'd established.
Yeah, in the big picture, I can kind of squint my eyes and see what they're going for in terms of the cause of our problem, the source of our mortal peril is also the solution. I get it, sure, but I too bumped a bit on I'm sorry, there are magic healing neutrinos. What?
The can do anything.
Yeah, I know that so much in Star Trek is made up. Omega particles don't exist. It seemed just a little bit laughable to me that it came down to, don't worry, the neutrinos, which have nothing to do with interacting with, that's one of the defining features of neutrinos, is that they don't interact. It's why they're so hard to detect, is because of how little they interact with things. And to say that actually these magic neutrinos work in the exact opposite way from anything you've ever heard about neutrinos working. And it just so happens that there's a lot of them here. It was probably the element of the episode that worked for me the least, unfortunately, was that hand-wavy magic solution. I get that we're in Star Trek and all this shit is made up and silly sometimes, but it has to feel like you're making just a little bit more of an effort. It didn't pass the smell test for me.
Well, for most of it, the focus was in the right place. You were focusing on particularly Scotty and Chapel's skill, intelligence, and resourcefulness. So the solution should come from that. It shouldn't come from, we've heard of these magic particles and we think they might be out there, apropos of nothing.
Right. It's like the writers of the show think that a fictional character remembering a fictional solution is the same as the character solving the problem. No, the character didn't figure something out in the way that an audience is going to care about just because you had them remember this magic particle we've never heard of before. That is not a character solving a problem.
No. Like I say, they'd written themselves into that corner where the stakes were so unimaginably high that there was no real other way out of it. And as soon as Mbenga gets crushed by that desk, that example you talk about with the subway train, there is no known way to save him. So you need to wave a magic wand and do it.
Right.
So in order to solve that problem, you need to scale back his injury to something that's treatable, but not based on the resources they currently have.
Right. That was the moment in the show where once they said that the thing that happened to him was fatal, I was like, maybe they aren't going to figure this out. Maybe the episode is about Chapel coming to terms with this, as horrible and unexpected as it is and would be for the audience, because I really do like this character, and I had assumed because he appears in TOS that we would see him again, but I was thinking to myself that they really have painted themselves into a corner here, and I'm curious to see how they will figure out that this is not actually fatal and how she will resolve the problem. And for the solution to just essentially be, oh, she remembered magic existed, that just doesn't excite me dramatically. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you could have had as life-threatening an injury that was treatable, but like I say, they just don't have what they need at that moment because there's no power or whatever.
Right. We could save his life, but given circumstances, the resources at hand, it's just not possible. And for her to figure out a way to jury-rig a solution, or for her and someone else, like Scotty or Pelliot, someone in engineering, to figure out a way to shunt some power to some fucking bullshit, I don't know. But there's a solution that would involve her thinking through steps that have logical internal consistency within the framework of the show, and isn't just, I waved my magic wand and now there's this particle you've never heard of before, except in the context in which it operates not at all like this, and that's going to be the solution to all of our problems.
Yeah, it wasn't Scotty figuring out a way to slow the ship down or escape the wormhole. It was, yeah, we'll get some fuel out of this magic particle. Great.
Right. We'll get magic fuel and magic healing particles both at the same time. Isn't that a happy coincidence?
I knew as soon as they mentioned that the Bussard collectors were getting upgraded that they were going to be part of some kind of major plot point later in the episode.
Which is fine. I'm fine if your solution is doing some risky maneuver so that the Bussard collectors are poking out of the slipstream. I was open to any kind of wacky solution that involved actual work. It just felt a little bit like this was we just happened to remember about this solution that's presented to us on a platter. There were obviously some challenges in getting the data, like that whole sequence where we have both Spock and La'an going outside the ship to gather some bit of data that's going to give them the information about these particles. It was a challenge to, I guess, engage with this solution, but all of that shoe leather could just as easily have been spent on a different solution altogether.
Yeah, well, the crawling outside of the ship thing, that was at least somewhat character-driven, as in Spock had to risk his life to go out there, and this is the thing that can get us the information we need. Then that fails, and he might be dead because they had to jettison the pod. He won't because he's Spock, and we know that he makes it. So fine, La'an goes out. He did get the data, but the chip is destroyed. But don't worry, he's seen it, so he remembers it and he can impart it using a mind meld. That's a good character solution. And then you have the lingering Spock-La'an relationship, which ended in the previous episode, didn't it? At the start of the previous episode.
Yeah, I think so.
So you have La'an motivated to go after him specifically because of their now off-again connection. So there's stuff there, and I like to sort of call forward to Star Trek 4. A Vulcan's memory is good enough for me. They trust your guesses more than most people's facts.
Right.
That kind of vibe, that's the vibe that they were getting at there. But I like that. This is what we need to do to get some information that we need in order to solve this. And, oh crap, that didn't work out the way we wanted. That's what I did like, where there was, okay, we can try this, and then it would kind of work. Like when they launched the probe and it blew up. Okay, we didn't get everything we needed, but we've got something. We've got something to work with here.
Yes, that was a moment I really liked, where they sent out the probe and it got destroyed right away, and Scotty's like, shit. And the Vulcan cadet's making some snide remark about, we only succeeded in destroying more valuable equipment. And Scotty is like, no. There's some data that we can draw some conclusion from, and it provides a useful bit of information for the problem that they're in. I did really like that element of it. I thought that the episode was at its best when it was doing things like that.
Yeah, because it kept the tension escalating. It's not that everything fails, it's that it works partially, and then it leads us to another problem.
Yeah, it's leading us to another problem, raising the stakes of the situation, but also revealing something about Scotty as a character and as the engineer that we know he's going to be. So, yeah, I really like that moment and those moments like that.
And in terms of this thematic thread that we've had, I would generously say has been threaded throughout this season. I think it's only really been mentioned in the first episode and in this episode. But the whole idea of everyone's feeling knackered, everyone's really tired, everyone's overworked, and Pike is an absolute slave driver at the moment because he's grieving and he's bringing everybody down with him. He's bumming everybody out. He's making them work all the time. And even in this episode, we're approaching the weekend, but Pike won't sign the damn paperwork that relinquishes command for a couple of days. Come on, Pike. And then it's the, well, we've encountered a problem. Well, we're already here. You might as well take your station, Mortagus. For God's sake, man. Let us leave 5 minutes early. Jesus.
Good God. Everything always happens on Alpha Shift.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone's very polite and they only attack during business hours.
Yeah.
It's very useful for everybody concerned. Except for when it's overnight and Janeway complains about being woken up in the middle of the night and by Harry Kim, who's on the night shift. But generally speaking, it's the main characters that are exposed to everything. But when I say this is generously called a thematic thread, because it isn't really, it's relegated more to, it's mentioned every once in a while, as in twice, as far as I can remember. I don't remember episodes 3, 4, and 5 well enough to remember if it came up there at all, but I don't think so. But it could be interesting, actually. It could be this, let's create a bit of conflict here, actually. Let's have the crew be not happy with their manager, with their boss, because he's overworking them. That would get in the way of the cozy core that they've settled into in this show. It could be, Pike's a good captain, but he needs to cut us some slack here. We're very tired and we work really hard and it's not fair and we just want a day off. If you see the Enterprise as a workplace, you could have, say, Ortegas and Uhura making fun of Pike when he's not there because he's overworking them, that kind of stuff. You know, the way that people gossip in offices and things. I think that would add a bit more texture and it would give us a bit more tension within the show as well. It's just a shame that there's that potential there. They keep mentioning it. I say keep twice, but they've mentioned it and they haven't really done anything with it. So it doesn't really have much weight as a thing. It's just a thing that's been mentioned twice, but is given more attention than its importance would seem to suggest.
Yeah, I don't want to be rude here, but it does sometimes feel as if the writers are holding up an idea to us and saying, see, this is an idea. We have ideas. We've got one right here. See it? It's here. And thinking that that's all the exploration of said idea that we need. It just feels like a very superficial presentation of a possible conflict or source of conflict, and that's it. It's like the idea of this conflict or of this problem existing is enough, and they don't have to do any more work. And I think you and I both probably feel as if actually we'd like you to dig in on some of this stuff. How does the crew feel in a utopian, post-capitalist, post-labor society where you feel like you're boss essentially is not treating you guys as well as he could. And also you're in this quasi-military hierarchy that has a chain of command that is expected to be rigidly followed. These are conflicts that would emerge with human beings, or, you know what I'm saying, with entities, with thinking entities, thinking and feeling creatures as a part of a crew would be feeling these things and expressing these feelings and acting on these feelings in ways that I think would be interesting to dramatize, and we don't see it. And I think that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have to make it this big plot point where they mutiny against them or anything like that. But
No.
Develop it in more subtle ways. So it could be you're in this crisis situation, but everyone's tired and therefore they're not at their best. And that's part of the tension. Scotty's sluggish when thinking of a solution because he's worked, 6 days in a row or anything like that. It could be stuff like that where the performance is slipping because of the fatigue that he's causing. And at some point there can be a reckoning around, I've been actually dragging everybody down with my own grief. That's not fair of me as a leader. I've failed to consider the emotional well-being of my own crew. I'm only considering my own emotional well-being or ignoring my own emotional well-being, whatever it may be. It glances at something interesting. And I would just love to see people on the show bitching about their boss. I know they're all one big happy family on the Enterprise, but even a boss you like will make decisions that you don't agree with.
Agreed. DS9 had that sometimes where, like you said, you don't even have to spend a ton of time on it, but there's an episode where they're on the Defiant on a mission and Worf is running the crew pretty ragged, and O'Brien, who has a relationship with him already, pulls him aside and just goes like, hey, these guys know what they're doing. You need to trust them to do their job. I understand you want to run a tight ship and you want to make a good impression on everybody and make it seem like you know what you're doing, but also you need to consider that these are professionals and humans. You need to maybe use a little bit of a lighter touch. It's a couple of scenes. It's like a little mini through line in that episode where the story is about something completely different, but it's a few scenes that add texture and character to the series, and I'd love to see more opportunities taken in this show to do that.
That was in Starship Down as well, the thing you're referring to.
Starship Down, thank you. I couldn't remember if it was the same episode.
Where Worf was haranguing the engineers and expecting his instructions to be carried out. And O'Brien's like, these guys aren't officers. They never went to Starfleet Academy.
Cops.
You need to give them a problem to solve. You need to understand how to manage them. And this is something that Pike seems to be forgetting. And the thing is, you don't have to characterize them as being quote unquote the bad guy in order to have organic tension. Because like I say, people like their boss and will bitch about them when they make a bad decision or upset them in some way. And again, thinking of DS9, the episode The Begotten, the one where Odo gets the baby changeling. And there's a scene in that where Sisko turns up and is like, how's it going with the changeling? It's like, yeah, we're making progress. Good. Oh, by the way, Starfleet wants regular reports. In that scene, Sisko is quote unquote the bad guy because he's the voice of the authority and he's the one that's relaying the bad news from Starfleet, as in, by the way, they're looking over your shoulder and they're doing it through me and that's my job. Deal with it. And of course, Odo doesn't like that and he's worried about it because he knows what Starfleet can be like. And Sisko's a nuanced enough character that he can be that for one episode without destroying him as a character.
Yeah, Sisko was able to bear a lot of moral ambiguity through the course of that series and still be a beloved character. And I think that the show betrays a lack of confidence in audiences by not taking those sorts of chances.
Yeah. Well, I've talked about it before where Pike finds out that Mbenga kills the Klingon ambassador and he's like, yeah, cool. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. That hasn't affected our relationship in any way, and I don't have to report it to Starfleet because it's up to me. Or earlier this season where it's like, yeah, I know he stabbed Kirk, La'an, but I'm not putting that in the report. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
That's fine.
In that case, I understand why he did it, because she wasn't herself and he doesn't want her going down for something that wasn't her fault.
Of course.
But you don't seem to get an awful lot of, sometimes Pike has to make the tough call and he has to be the not your friend captain. Or they could establish, as I've suggested before, that Una does that. He likes to be their friend. He likes to be their dad captain. But when they need to get a telling off, it's Una that does it. She's better at it.
Right. I'm not trying to fetishize punishment or anything like that. But has Pike ever dressed anyone down?
Not in this show. He did in Discovery.
Yeah. Demote someone for something. Confine someone to the brig. I don't think he's ever disciplined a single character.
No.
And that's a feature of every captain on every show is someone fucks up enough at some point, even if you like them, even if you understand why, for them to not ever get any sort of dressing down from the captain. I'm sure that I'm forgetting examples where Pike has been a little bit of a disciplinarian, but I think it's a noticeable difference compared to captains of years past.
Yeah, he hasn't really done it. And like I said, I don't need a lot out of this, but I need more than you're giving me out of this.
Sure.
You're a slave driver, Pike. We're tired and sick of this. We just want to have a night off. We want to go for a few drinks and we want to spend a weekend not working. That'd be great. As much as it's great exploring the universe and encountering all this strange and amazing new stuff, we're tired, man. We're tired. Also, we've had two things that tried to kill us this season.
Right. We're traumatized as well. Very little talk of counseling, which is interesting given all of the crazy stuff they encounter.
Yeah. The only person that's ever had counselling in this show was La'an. That was in season 1. Off screen, of course.
Yeah. It is a little funny to me that they put a fair point of emphasis on it in Discovery eventually and have not at all picked up that torch for this. Maybe because they're like, it's TOS era. We don't really do that back then.
Space cowboys, they're having a good time. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, we're all here for a good time, not a long time. It's fine.
So yeah, it's just another add to the list of missed opportunities, really. And maybe they'll pick it up further in the season. Maybe you'll have a point where Una's like, right, Pike, stop it. We need a day off.
Sure.
But good episode. I know we've torn it down to some degree, but I like this episode.
We've been nitpicking, but yeah, we both like the episode overall. I still give it somewhat enthusiastic recommendation. I think to our earlier discussion, episode 2 is probably still the high mark for me, but I solidly enjoyed at least 4 of these first 6 episodes, and this is definitely one of the ones that I enjoyed.
Well, I've enjoyed 3 out of the 6 episodes, and this is one of the ones I enjoyed. And I think, like I said, the escalation of the threat, the situation as it was, I think that did a lot to, at least on first viewing, paper over the cracks of the things that weren't working as well. I found myself very invested in it the first time I watched it. And it was only when I went for a note-taking viewing, I was like, oh, this isn't quite working, and this part isn't quite working, and so on. So I think it holds up as a very well-paced experience, at least as a first viewing. It's when you're analysing it that it starts to fall apart.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the pacing, the style. I thought it was directed in a pretty dynamic way. They used a lot of split screen in a way that I found fun. As an exercise of television making, I think it's quite engaging. I think that some of our quibbles are, a lot of them are bigger picture issues with the way that certain things indicate problems the show has overall. I think that some conflicts struggle with feeling fully motivated, but other than the quibbles we mentioned, they're doing a solid job this week, and I hope that we see more of this quality or higher. To go back to your question that we started out with, I do feel better at this point in the season than I did at 6 episodes into season 3. I trust that these sorts of episodes of this quality, and I know you don't really like the gimmicky episodes. For me, they're also hit or miss. I tend to enjoy them more than you, but this sort of episode, it might be a trope that Trek has done before, but I still think as a basic storytelling model, it works for Star Trek. And I think it's a pretty good example of it.
Yeah, we have referred to previous examples of this as we've been talking, so they are still falling into the trap of, we're going to reference this episode we're riffing on in some way. We're going to remind you of that episode we're riffing on rather than trying to set themselves apart in some way. And yeah, I could definitely feel the DNA of, say, Disaster or Starship Down, or even Memento Mori, which is them riffing on their own episode. I'm also struggling to remember some of the other disaster-ish episodes over the long run of Star Trek. I'm sure if I was to think about it, I would think of other things that it reminds me of in terms of the things that they're doing in Enterprise where they couldn't slow down. That's kind of what was going on here as well.
Yeah, it was the sort of endless acceleration.
Yeah. Part of me wondered if they were going to end up somewhere very far away at the end of the episode because they were in a wormhole.
Yeah, again, it's just one of those things of, they just didn't always feel like they fully thought through the scenario that they were setting up. They've been traveling at ever increasing speeds, including finally breaking the warp barrier, whatever the hell that means. None of them turned into salamanders, so I'm guessing it wasn't some sort of transwarp thing.
They probably just went to like warp 8 or something like that.
Yeah. What is even the warp barrier in this era?
The warp threshold, whatever that is.
Yeah. They changed the scale from TOS to TNG, but I think maximum warp for that era of Enterprise was nowhere near what they could go by the time TNG rolls around. So what does that even mean for this Enterprise? Clearly they think the ship would just fly apart at some point, but the danger of that threshold felt a little vague to me. But the fact that they don't even address where are we now? It slingshotted us where exactly?
Yeah. Just seems like we went in a big circle or something like that. We're pretty much back where we started. We're okay.
Could even set you up for, I realize there's no thread set up for a two-parter, but a problem of we encountered this anomaly that sent us here, and now we've got to deal with whatever's on the other side of it, whoever's on the other side of it, or work our way back.
Oh, and we use most of our fuel escaping.
Yeah, some ongoing challenge that they have to deal with, but it's fine.
Yeah, I'm half and half for this season so far, so who knows how it'll pivot. I don't know whether I'll be leaning one side or the other by the end. In theory, it could be half and half by the end because there are 10 episodes.
That's true. It could be split right down the middle. I'm optimistic that I'll end up liking a majority of them. I think the ones that tend to play in safer waters in terms of the kinds of stories that they're telling, those are so far the ones that I've enjoyed the most. But I do want them to keep taking chances. Just I'm waiting for some of those chances to be executed a little bit more consistently. Executed well.
Yeah. We're out of the waters of all the gimmicky stuff that they set up, aren't we? We had them all that they told us were happening.
Oh, the ones they've told us are happening, which I thought was an interesting idea to give us 3 episodes in a row of really leaning into a gimmick, for lack of a better word. Yeah, maybe the rest of the season is just going to play out relatively normal episode of the week. You talk about them hearing the feedback that they got from season 3 and making adjustments for season 4. Well, you and I have talked about how 4 had already wrapped production. So what sort of adjustments could they make? Episode order is one of the adjustments they could make. If they were feeling like they don't like gimmick episodes as much as we had hoped, let's front load all 3 of them. That is one thing they could have decided to do so that the back half of the season would, in their minds, finish stronger with audiences. I don't know. It's possible that we are done with them because they did cluster them together.
There is a rumored anime episode, but I think that's supposed to be next season.
Oh, okay. I know your mileage varies more than mine, but I'm fine with them trying these wacky things. It always comes down to execution. If it's a comedy episode, if I didn't laugh more than half the episode, guess what? It gets a thumbs down from me. You are telling me you are trying to make an episode that is funny. So if I am not entertained, laughing, or at least chuckling or having a big grin on my face the whole episode, that is not successful to me. Those are big swings. That means sometimes they're going to miss with certain audiences. Maybe some of our co-hosts are more amused by some of the... I struggled a bit with season 3. I don't know if that's because I have experience with hallucinogens, but it was just a little like the comedy in this episode just isn't working for me. And I've had comedy episodes of Strange New Worlds work for me in the past, so it's not an across-the-board thing, but it is something that if you don't really clear that bar, I will struggle.
I don't think any of the comedy episodes have worked for me, and also they just seem to be recycling Buffy and Angel episodes that were made like 20 years ago, because we had the musical one and then the puppet one.
Yeah, those things won't bug me because I never watched either of those shows. So if there's a thing that's like, Simpsons did it, Buffy did it, sure. But I try to judge it from what it actually is. And if Buffy had done a puppet episode or the musical episode before, I wouldn't care if those episodes hit for me. There were other problems with them besides the fact that they've been done before.
Yeah, it's all down to execution. I'm not against the notion of a musical episode. Most shows do musical episodes, or certainly a lot of genre shows end up doing a musical episode at some point. And in terms of the puppet episode, Angel did that. And it's possible to make that good because the puppet episode of Angel is excellent. But what it does is it furthers the characters through the arcs that are going on in the season in interesting ways. Buffy did a silent episode, for example. And it's an episode about how people can't communicate. And they have to find a different way of communicating. That's interesting from a narrative point of view. Plus, it's one of those, Joss Whedon, for all his faults, wanted to challenge himself as a writer. I'm going to write a silent episode. How do I get this information across when I can't use dialogue? The thing that's really easy in terms of conveying information. And it's almost like the Strange New World staff, they start with, well, successful shows did a puppet episode, so we'll do a puppet episode and we'll be a successful show. It's like, we're just going to do it because other shows have done it, rather than here's why we're doing our puppet episodes and here's why it's going to work for us and here's why it's going to benefit us in some way. It just didn't. The puppet one just didn't. I've only seen it once and I haven't written about it yet, but I'm really struggling to think of what kind of significance it really had I imagine something for Spock, but I'm not quite sure yet. This isn't a review of the Puppet episode, but that's where I'm at with the way Strange New Worlds executes a lot of this stuff, where it's, why did you make this? It doesn't seem like you had a clear reason for making it other than we wanted to do this.
I think it works best, like you said earlier with Buffy, when you are setting yourself a constraint that is meant to challenge you creatively to overcome it and see what happens as a result. Hopefully something exciting. To your point, again, some of these gimmicks seemed like they just thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to do this? And didn't really think past the, oh, well, wouldn't it be fun to do this in Star Trek? And give any thought to, well, what could those genre conventions that we're playing with reveal about these characters specifically, or the worlds that they occupy, or anything about the themes we like to explore in Star Trek? What is the thing that only this storytelling method, or that this storytelling method makes easiest? What is it that we can use about that to reveal something special that we can't do in a regular episode? And it doesn't feel like they think that through that deeply about it. It doesn't feel like there's that added level of consideration.
Yeah, there is one continuing thread, and again, it's going to be generous because it's only been brought up twice, really, but from the second episode and this episode, I think they're linked in the sense of space is very dangerous and we're going to encounter stuff that we wish we hadn't encountered. In the second episode, the horror episode, the very discovery of the Griffin taints their desire to explore, because we explored and this is what we found and we didn't like what we found and we don't have an answer for it, which is even worse. And then in this, it's sometimes you'll just fall into a wormhole and it might destroy your ship. So we're out here because we're really excited about exploring and charting the unknown and stuff like that. But yeah, sometimes the unknown is pretty freaky and pretty scary.
It is. And what I'd love for us to have a better sense of as an audience coming out of these scenarios is, what did the characters learn about themselves and one another through the experience? And some cases, it reveals a lot and it works really well and it gives us a much richer portrait of these characters. Even in a series where you only have 10 episodes a season, giving characters pressure cooker scenarios to confront allows an audience to get a much better sense of who they are much more quickly. Pressure cooking always makes cooking faster, right? So it also reveals character more quickly. I like these episodes for that purpose. Any criticisms that we have for it, I think, are more about the opportunities missed rather than the intentions behind the decisions being made.
Yeah, in the second episode, all three characters learn something about themselves and learn something they weren't necessarily comfortable with.
Yeah, good point.
And learn something about what they do that they're not comfortable with. And they don't really reflect on it here, but it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Where we're just flying around minding our business and then we almost died. And there was no way that we could have avoided it because it just happened. We had almost no warning, which is what Scotty was upset about. The ship didn't even tell us in enough time to avoid it.
Yeah, it's almost a sense of betrayal. He feels betrayed and let down by the ship, by his tools, by his training. All of this stuff might still not matter. Things will still just happen. And that can be a difficult thing to accept in life. It can be a difficult thing to accept on this ship when you're regularly putting yourself into situations where the unfortunate is more likely to happen.
Yeah. And they mentioned that crew died in this episode, but they don't really reflect on it in any way. It's mentioned once, but supports that idea, right? We just fell into something and people died. That's horrible. They had no idea that they were walking into a life-threatening situation when they got out of bed this morning.
Yeah, exactly. Life and death are so random. That is one of those things that Strange New Worlds does want to grapple with. Sometimes not always at the depth that we would prefer, but it is on its mind.
Yeah, for sure. Any last things on this episode before we try and escape this wormhole that we're stuck in?
No, I think we're talked out, at least for me. I've said my piece. I think we're largely on the same page with this episode.
Yeah, I have reviewed it, but I haven't given it a rating yet, but I'm hovering somewhere in the 6 to 7 out of 10 territory.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Somewhere like that. It's elevated by the situation that they're in and the pacing and so on, but falls into all those traps that the show always falls into.
Yeah, and the actors do well with the material that they're given.
Yeah, well, that was our coverage of episode 6 of season 4 of Strange New World. It's called Off Hour. Thank you all for joining us. You can check out our full listing of episodes over at wearestarfleetpod.com, where you can also learn more about the hosts. Please do hit us up on our socials at StarfleetPod on Blue Sky, Instagram and Threads. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you've liked everything you've heard, and if you did, please consider giving us a 5-star review on your platform of choice. Until next week, where episode 7 will be covered by some configuration of hosts and guests, hit it.